My parents decided to give my entire college fund to my brother, claiming he deserved it more. I quietly packed my old bags. 6 months later, they pleaded with me to return home. The day I found out wasn't filled with dramatic shouting like you see in movies. No, it was worse because it was quiet, cold, almost casual. I remember standing in our living room, the air thick with summer heat, the smell of my mom's coffee burning on the warmer. I was grinning like an idiot, clutching the acceptance letter from my dream university. 4 years of staying out of trouble, grinding through school, and working weekends to keep busy had all led to this moment. Dad barely glanced up from his crossword puzzle, and Mom didn't even bother to stand from her recliner. She simply sipped her coffee and said, "Yeah, about that. You're not going." At first, I laughed, thinking she was joking. A bad joke, perhaps. They had always assured me there was a college fund since I was 12. It was the one promise they repeated every birthday, every report card ceremony, every awkward family dinner. Work hard, son, and we'll make sure you get to college. I had worked hard. I stayed out of trouble when others didn't. I said no to parties, skipped vacations, and told myself that if I kept my head down, the payoff would come. And now, staring at them, my letter trembling slightly in my hands, all I received was a shrug. "It's all gone," Mom said. "We gave it to Jake." Jake, my younger brother, who had never passed a class without cheating. Jake, who had wrecked 2 cars by the time he turned 17. Jake, who could charm anyone long enough to avoid real consequences. I felt my mouth open, but no words came out. Mom leaned back in her chair, stretching as if she had just finished a long day's work instead of shattering my world. "He deserves it more," she said. "He's got potential. He just needs a little help to get serious. You'll figure something out." I wish I could tell you I screamed, that I fought back, that I demanded to know how they could do this to me after everything. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling my heart crack in slow motion, realizing that all those years of sacrifice had been invisible to them, meaningless. Dad finally looked up, his expression a mix of impatience and dismissal. "Your brother needs this opportunity more than you do," he added, folding his newspaper with deliberate care. "You've always been the responsible one. You'll land on your feet." The acceptance letter crumpled in my hand as I squeezed it tight, the corners digging into my palm. All I could think about were the countless nights I had stayed up late studying while Jake partied. The weekends I spent working at the local diner while he slept off hangovers. The science fair trophies, honor roll certificates, and perfect attendance awards that papered my bedroom walls. None of it mattered. I had been running a race they never intended for me to win. I walked upstairs without another word, each step heavier than the last. I found my old duffel bag, the same one I used for soccer tournaments in middle school. I stuffed it with a few changes of clothes, my battered laptop, and a little cash I had saved from my after-school jobs. No one tried to stop me. Dad didn't lift his head, and Mom didn't move from her chair. I stared at my room one last time before leaving. The faded blue walls I had painted myself when I was 14. The string lights draped across the ceiling that made even the darkest nights feel magical. The bookshelf sagging under the weight of second-hand textbooks and novels I had collected over the years. This room had been my sanctuary, my escape when family dinners grew too tense or when Jake's drama consumed every molecule of oxygen in the house. Now it just felt like another lie. I guess Jake was out somewhere, probably celebrating his new life with my future. When I stepped out onto the porch, the cicadas buzzing loudly in the humid air, I realized I didn't even know where I was going. But it didn't matter. I knew one thing for certain, I was never coming back. I slept in my car that first night. It wasn't a plan. Honestly, there was no plan, just a numb, autopilot version of me driving aimlessly until my old Civic's gaslight flickered on. I pulled into a Walmart parking lot, leaned the seat back, and stared at the cracked roof fabric, feeling smaller than I ever had before. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I kept thinking maybe Dad would call. Maybe Mom would at least send a text, something, anything. But my phone stayed dark. Not a single missed call. Not a single message. Thinking back, I hauled the old coffee table into my tiny space and started with sandpaper, stripping away years of neglect until my fingers bled and sawdust coated every surface of my shoebox apartment. I couldn't afford proper tools, so I made do with what I could find. I borrowed sandpaper and half-empty cans of stain from the back room of the hardware store, where the manager took pity on me. I used brushes that had been washed and re-washed until the bristles frayed. I worked through the night, the rhythm of scraping and smoothing somehow calming the chaos in my mind. By morning, that discarded table had transformed. It wasn't perfect, but it was beautiful in its resilience. I snapped a picture on my phone and posted it online for sale, not expecting much. To my surprise, it sold within hours to a young couple furnishing their first apartment. The woman ran her hand over the smooth surface, smiling. "It's exactly what we were looking for," she said, counting out cash, more cash than I had made in days of hauling boxes. I started driving around affluent neighborhoods on trash day, looking for discarded furniture. It was astonishing what people threw away: solid wood dressers with broken drawers, tables with water rings, chairs missing a spindle or two. I dragged them back to my tiny space one by one, sometimes making multiple trips with my struggling Civic. With some sandpaper, wood glue, and paint I bought from the hardware store's discount section, I began bringing them back to life. The first month was painful. I lived on packets of instant noodles and apples, saving every penny for supplies. I learned through trial and error how to repair veneer, how to match stain colors, and how to reinforce wobbly legs. I watched endless tutorials on my phone, the screen propped against paint cans as I followed along. Some pieces were disastrous, while others turned out better than I could have imagined. My little rented space became a workshop. I drag pieces in through the back door, work on them under the harsh fluorescent lights until my eyes burned, then sell them online. The first piece I sold was a small bedside table I had painted a soft blue. It sold within hours of posting. I almost cried when the woman handed me $60, telling me it was perfect for her daughter's room. "You have an eye for this," she told me, already taking pictures of the table to show her friends. "Do you have a business card or something?" My brother's redoing his whole house. I didn't have a business card. I didn't even have a business name, just a desperation that was slowly transforming into determination. That night, I sat on my makeshift bed, a foam pad on the floor of my workshop, and created a simple logo and business cards on a website that offered free designs. I called it Phoenix Furniture Restoration, rising from the ashes just like I was trying to do. It wasn't glamorous. I was still living off ramen and dollar store peanut butter. But slowly, a flicker of hope began to push back the dark, and I kept quiet about it all. No social media posts, no calls home, no reaching out to people who might ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. I wanted to grow this thing in the dark, where no one could stomp it out before it had the chance to breathe. Connie stopped by sometimes, bringing coffee and chipped mugs, watching me work on a spindle or drawer slide. "You got talent, kid," she said once, running her hand over a refinished tabletop. "Don't let nobody tell you different." Coming from her, with her permanent scowl and few words, it felt like winning an award. My hands changed that summer. The soft palms of a student hardened into a craftsman's tools. Calluses formed where sanders vibrated against my skin, and tiny scars from splinters and errant chisel slips became badges of honor. My fingernails stayed perpetually rimmed with stain, no matter how much I scrubbed. But when I ran my hands over a finished piece, feeling the silky smoothness of well-worked wood, I felt a pride I had never known before. The first time a customer commissioned a custom piece, a farmhouse table for a family of 5, I panicked. It was one thing to restore something that already existed, it was another entirely to build from scratch. I spent hours at the library studying woodworking books, sketching designs, and calculating dimensions. The man had paid half upfront, more money than I had seen it once in months, and I was terrified of failing. For 2 weeks, I barely slept. I bought lumber with the deposit money, learning through YouTube videos how to select the right pieces. I made mistakes, plenty of them. Joints that didn't align, legs that wobbled, measurements that were off by crucial fractions. But I kept at it, taking apart and rebuilding until it was right. People were as fixable as furniture. It happened 6 months to the day after I left. I didn't even realize it at first. I was sanding down an old coffee table, headphones in, the smell of varnish thick in the air. My phone was buried in my backpack, forgotten for hours at a time, like it always was these days. But when I finally pulled it out to check the time, I saw them, missed calls. First one, then two, then eight, all from the same people who had watched me walk out without so much as a goodbye, Mom, Dad, even Jake. I stared at the screen for a long minute. Half of me wanted to block the numbers outright, toss the phone into a storm drain, and pretend they never existed. But curiosity won out. I swiped open the latest voicemail. It was Dad's voice, small and shaking. "Sweetheart, we need to talk. Please, things are bad. Just call us back, okay? We miss you. We miss you." The words felt foreign, like he was speaking another language. I sat back on the concrete floor of my tiny shop, the one I had built with my own 2 hands, piece by piece, and listened to the next message. Mom, gruff and awkward. "Listen, sweetie, it's time we put the past behind us. Your brother's had a rough patch. The family needs you. The family needs you." It was almost funny if it hadn't been so pathetic. I scrolled further, finding the most desperate one of all, Jake himself. "Sis, I screwed up. Okay, I know you're mad, but can you just come home for a little while? Please? Mom's freaking out. Dad's losing it. We need you, girl. The boy who deserved it more. The golden child. Begging." I placed the phone down on my workbench, the screen still glowing with notifications. For a moment, the old pull was there, the need to fix, to soothe, to set aside my own wounds to bandage theirs. It had been my role for as long as I could remember, the peacemaker, the fixer, the responsible one. How many times had I cleaned up Jake's messes? How many times had I swallowed my own needs to meet theirs? I picked up my sander instead. I didn't call back. I didn't text. Instead, I spent that night polishing every piece of furniture I had ready for the weekend's market. I stayed up past midnight, humming along to the soft music in my earbuds, the rhythmic scrape of sandpaper against wood more comforting than any memory of home had ever been. The next morning, I opened Instagram out of sheer habit. And there it was. My old town's local news had posted an update: former student expelled after financial scandal. Police investigating. Jake's face again, but this time no smile. The article explained what I already knew in my gut. After getting suspended, Jake had spiraled. Bad choices piled on top of bad choices. Student loans blown on parties. Fake GoFundMe pages set up and exposed. Friends he thought would cover for him turning him in instead. The Golden Boy's empire had crumbled, and with it, the last illusions my parents clung to. Now they needed a new savior. And somehow, after everything, after stealing my future and handing it to someone who lit it on fire, they thought it could still be me. The charges were serious enough that Jake might be facing actual legal consequences. The university was pursuing restitution for the fraudulent financial aid. His so-called friends had abandoned him the moment things got tough, and my parents, the very people who told me I'd figure something out when they gave away my future, were now desperate for me to come fix their golden child's mess. The funny thing is, I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just free. They were reaching out to someone who didn't exist anymore, the obedient daughter, the safety net, the quiet backup plan. That person had packed an old duffel bag and disappeared 6 months ago, and she was never coming back. I didn't rush my answer. In fact, I didn't answer at all, not at first. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. Dad switched tactics, sending long texts filled with old pictures, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, vacations where we all wore matching t-shirts. Like nostalgia alone could erase everything they'd done. Mom, less subtle, left voicemail after voicemail, each angrier than the last. How dare you ignore your own family? After all we did for you, your brother, your blood, for God's sake. Jake even tried guilt. Come on, sis. You can't just leave us like this. You're better than that. Better than what? Better than a family that only remembered my name when they needed saving? Each message was a rope thrown across a chasm they had back to that house, sitting at that same battered kitchen table where Mom had once told me I wasn't going anywhere anyway, made my stomach turn. I wasn't angry, I wasn't bitter. I was done. So one evening, I finally answered a call, not to explain, not to fight, just to close the door. Dad's voice was breathless with hope. "Honey." "Oh, thank God. We've been so worried. We just want to talk, that's all. Maybe you can come by this weekend." I waited for him to finish, then spoke, my voice low and calm. "No." A sharp silence crackled across the line. Dad tried to recover. "What? What do you mean, no?" "I'm not coming back," I said. "Not for a visit, not for a talk, not for anything. Sweetheart, please. We're family." I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "No, you were a family when it was convenient. Now you're just people I used to know." I heard him choke on a sob, but I didn't waver. "You made your choice when you gave my future away like spare change," I said. "And now I'm making mine." Before he could respond, before the tears and apologies and promises could come pouring out, I ended the call. I stared at the screen for a second, then turned the phone off. It felt lighter in my hand, like cutting the last thread of a life that had been dragging behind me like a broken kite. I stepped out onto the porch of my tiny rented shop, turned home. The sun was setting, streaking the sky with golden crimson. Warm air carried the smell of fresh-cut lumber and the sound of traffic. It smelled like freedom. I stood there for a long while, letting it all sink in. I wasn't the girl who had waited years for their approval. I wasn't the safety net for their bad decisions. I was me, standing on solid ground of my own making. And as I turned, heading back inside to the life I had built without them, I realized something: the past wasn't something I needed to run from anymore. It was something I had survived. And survival, quiet, stubborn, beautiful survival, was the best revenge of all. The thing about walking away is you expect it to feel like a battle. You brace for guilt, second thoughts, regret gnawing at you in the middle of the night. But none of that came. All I felt was quiet. Not the sharp, bitter kind. The good kind. The kind that feels like standing in an open field after a storm, breathing air that's finally clean. For years, I thought love meant sacrifice, shrinking myself smaller and smaller so they'd have more space, giving until there was nothing left but the hope they'd notice. But real love doesn't ask you to disappear. It doesn't hand your dreams to someone else and call it family. I didn't owe them an explanation. I didn't owe them a second chance. I owed it to myself to be free. And that's exactly what I chose. Winter came that year with a vengeance, the kind of cold that seeps through walls and makes your bones ache. I'd saved enough to put a proper heater in my workshop by then, but some mornings I'd still see my breath puffing in small clouds as I worked. Those were the hardest days, the ones where the memory of home warm despite everything else would creep back in uninvited. But I'd built something else by then, too: community. Connie brought me extra blankets without a word. The guy who ran the coffee shop at the end of the strip mall would save me day-old pastries. The local lumberyard started setting aside offcuts they'd normally throw away, calling me when the pile got big enough to be worth the trip. They weren't family, not in the traditional sense, but they were people who saw me, really saw me, and decided I was worth their kindness without conditions. And somehow, that was warmer than any house I'd ever lived in. If you're listening to this and you're where I was, standing at that crossroads, wondering if you should stay loyal to people who wouldn't blink if you disappeared, hear me clearly: you are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not cruel for walking away from people who only remember your worth when they're desperate. You are not broken because you got tired of proving you deserve love. You are enough, even if they never said it, especially if they never said it. And sometimes, the greatest act of love you can give yourself is to let go of the ones who made you doubt you ever deserved it. I didn't chase updates, but life has a funny way of bringing news to your doorstep even when you don't ask for it. A few months after that final call, I heard through an old neighbor that things at home planned for new beginnings, she said gruffly, already turning to leave before I could get emotional about it. It's strange, the things you notice when you're free. The mornings feel different, not rushed, not heavy, just quiet. The kind of quiet where you can actually hear your own thoughts again. I rented a better place, small but clean, with a little patch of grass out back where I could sit and watch the world go by. No one shouting down the stairs. No backhanded comments at dinner. Just me, breathing without apology. The business grew faster than I ever expected. Word of mouth mostly. One customer would tell a friend, and they'd tell two more. Soon, I wasn't just scraping by, I was making real money. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but enough to pay the bills comfortably. Enough to start saving. Enough to finally lift my head and look toward a future that felt like mine. I started getting regulars, people who came not just for the furniture but for the person behind it. One couple, Mr. and Mrs. Harris, stopped by one afternoon to pick up a custom table. They smiled, shook my hand, and said, "You should be proud. You're building something real that matters." And it hit me harder than I expected because for the first time, someone saw me not as a backup plan, not as a last resort, but as someone who mattered because of what she chose to become. I didn't have to prove anything anymore. Not to my family, not to strangers, not even to myself. I was already enough. Without the college fund, without the empty promises, without them everything they tried to hold over my head, their approval, their money, their love, it didn't own me anymore. It never did. They just made me think it did for a little while. The funny thing is, freedom doesn't feel like fireworks. It doesn't come with some grand movie moment where you throw your arms in the air and scream into the sky. It's quieter than that, softer. But when it settles in your bones, you know you'll never let it go again. Freedom looks like a slow Sunday morning, drinking bad coffee out of a chipped mug in a workshop that smells like sawdust and hope. It's picking up the phone and realizing you don't have to answer it just because someone demands you to. It's walking through a store and buying yourself something small, not because you need it, but because you want it, without a second thought or guilt gnawing at your gut. It's laughing, real belly-deep laughing, without glancing over your shoulder to see if someone's going to cut it short. I started making friends who didn't know my past, people who didn't carry the old expectations like chains around their necks. I started dreaming again. Not in the desperate way I used to, clinging to someday like a life raft, but in a way that feels possible, solid, breathing right there in front of you. I dreamed of buying my own building, of expanding the shop, of teaching other kids, the ones everyone gave up on, how to build something with their hands and believe in it. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. I stopped needing them to see me. Because the truth is, people who only loved you when you were useful to them were never really your family to begin with. Family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up. Family is who claps for you when no one else does, even if the clapping is just them standing quietly in your corner, holding space for your dreams. I don't know what Jake's doing now. I don't know if Mom still sits in that old recliner, staring at the TV, pretending she didn't throw away her real legacy. I don't know if Dad still glances at my empty place during holidays, wondering when I'll walk back through the door like nothing happened. And honestly, I don't care. I have my own table now, my own place to sit. And when I look around at the life I built, the friends, the customers, the quiet peace of knowing I chose myself, I don't see them missing. I just see me, finally fully free. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: you don't have to stay where you're not valued. You don't have to bleed yourself trying to earn love that should have been freely given. Sometimes, the bravest thing you'll ever do is simply walk away and keep walking. I didn't get the life I thought I would have, I got something better, a life that's mine. A future they'll never touch. A peace they'll never understand. And that's enough.